The golden rays of sunset streamed through the enormous windows of the penthouse, casting long shadows across the Italian marble floors. Catherine Brooks sat motionless in her favorite armchair, her elegant fingers tracing the edge of an envelope that had just arrived by private courier. Inside was the confirmation that would change everything. Her appointment with Dr. Nathan Chen was scheduled for tomorrow morning. After 12 years of silence, she had made the decision that not a single soul in her family knew about. The surgery to restore her hearing would be her most carefully guarded secret. Catherine's silver hair caught the fading sunlight as she gazed at the family photographs arranged meticulously on the mantelpiece. Her late husband William smiled back at her from their wedding photo, taken 45 years ago. He had been gone for 8 years now, leaving her with their successful real estate empire, two daughters who had grown increasingly distant, and a world shrouded in silence after a progressive hearing loss that had culminated in complete deafness 12 years ago. Mrs. Brooks. Rosa Diaz appeared in the doorway, her hands moving in the familiar patterns of American Sign Language that she had learned when Catherine first lost her hearing. Your tea. Catherine smiled gratefully as Rosa set down the delicate porcelain teacup. Unlike her daughters, Rosa had taken the time to learn proper sign language rather than resorting to impatient gestures and hastily scribbled notes. In the 30 years Rosa had worked for the Brooks family, she had transitioned from housekeeper to Catherine's most trusted confidant. Thank you, Rosa, Catherine signed back, her movements graceful and precise. She hesitated, then continued signing. I need to tell you something important, but you must promise absolute secrecy. Rosa's kind eyes widened with concern as she sat down across from Catherine. Of course, Mrs. Brooks, always. Catherine handed her the envelope. I'm having surgery tomorrow, an experimental procedure that might restore my hearing. Rosa's mouth fell open as she read the medical documents. But this is wonderful news. Why keep it secret from Miss Ashley and Miss Melissa? A shadow passed over Catherine's face as she signed her response. I have my reasons. I want you to take me to the appointment. Tell everyone I'm visiting my sister in Chicago if they ask. The intercom buzzed, interrupting their conversation. Rosa checked the security monitor and sighed. Your daughters and their husbands are here for dinner, earlier than expected. Catherine nodded, quickly tucking the envelope into her desk drawer before smoothing down her cashmere sweater. Agia. Family dinners had become increasingly tense affairs in recent months. Ashley and Melissa visited more frequently since William's death. But Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that their attentiveness had more to do with her $80 million estate than genuine concern for her well-being. As she moved toward the foyer, Catherine caught her reflection in a gilded mirror. At 68, she remained a striking woman. Decades of yoga and careful nutrition had kept her figure trim, while her face showed the elegant aging of a woman who had embraced her years with grace. The only thing that betrayed her vulnerability was the custom-designed hearing aids. She no longer wore useless accessories since her hearing had deteriorated completely. The private elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, and her family burst in with the usual flurry of air kisses and exaggerated gestures. Ashley, her eldest at 41, strode in first with her signature confidence, designer handbag swinging from her arm. Her husband, James, followed, his sharp eyes immediately scanning the room as if mentally appraising its contents. Melissa entered more hesitantly, offering a small wave, while her husband, Daniel, strolled in with his hands in his pockets, eyeing the art collection that William had spent decades curating. Mother, Ashley mouthed with exaggerated clarity, a habit Catherine found simultaneously patronizing and unnecessary. She could read lips quite well after years of practice. Ashley bent down to kiss Catherine's cheek, her expensive perfume nearly overwhelming. You look wonderful. Catherine nodded, reaching for the notepad she kept nearby, her primary means of communication with family members who never bothered to learn sign language. She wrote quickly, "Lovely to see you all. Dinner is ready." Rosa gestured towards the dining room where she had prepared Catherine's famous roast recipe, one of the few connections to her past life as a talented home chef before William's wealth had made such domestic pursuits unnecessary. As they moved toward the table, Catherine couldn't help but notice how James and Daniel exchanged meaningful glances. Something was brewing beneath the surface. She could sense it in the tense set of their shoulders and the overly cheerful smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. The dining room, with its panoramic views of the city skyline and table set with Wedgwood china and sterling silver, had once been the heart of family gatherings. William had insisted on weekly family dinners, believing that success meant nothing without family to share it with. Now, these dinners felt like business meetings, with undercurrents of agenda and calculation that Catherine couldn't quite decipher. She took her place at the head of the table, a position William had insisted she maintain after his death. "You built this empire with me," he had told her during those final days in the hospital. "Never let anyone make you feel less than the queen you are." If only he could see how the dynamics had shifted in his absence. The dinner progressed as usual, with Catherine watching her family talk amongst themselves, occasionally turning to include her with simplified comments and exaggerated gestures. She nodded and smiled when appropriate, scribbling short responses on her notepad. Years of lip reading had made her adept at following conversations, though her family rarely remembered this fact. "So, Mother," Ashley began, making sure Catherine could see her lips clearly, "we've been thinking about your properties in the Hamptons. They must be such a burden to manage." Catherine raised an eyebrow and wrote, "My management company handles everything efficiently." James leaned forward, his corporate smile firmly in place. "But wouldn't it be easier to transfer some of those responsibilities? Perhaps put some properties in Ashley and Melissa's names for tax purposes?" "Of course." Ah, there it was, the real reason for tonight's visit. Catherine had suspected as much when the dinner invitation came suddenly yesterday. She wrote a non-committal response about considering their suggestion and watched as relief flooded James's face. When dessert was served, Daniel asked for more wine, prompting Catherine to rise and head toward the kitchen for another bottle. As she passed through the swinging door, she paused, remaining out of sight but able to see her family through the crack between the door and frame. Without her present, they dropped all pretenses. "God, this is exhausting," Ashley sighed, slumping in her chair. "Having to speak so slowly and write everything down. It's like dealing with a child." "At least she's considering the property transfer," James replied, loosening his tie. "If we can get the Hamptons houses in your name before she changes her will again. That's $5 million each minimum." Daniel nodded, shoving a forkful of dessert into his mouth. "Did you see how confused she looked when we mentioned the tax benefits? I bet she doesn't even understand half of what we're saying anymore. Age and isolation haven't been kind." Melissa at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "She's still sharp. Daniel, don't underestimate her." "Oh, please," Ashley scoffed. "She's a lonely old woman who can't even hear. How would she know what we're planning? James has been moving money from her smaller accounts for months, and she hasn't noticed a thing." Catherine felt her heart constrict painfully in her chest. Though she had suspected her family's motives weren't pure, the blatant manipulation and theft came as a shock. She steadied herself against the wall, her knuckles white as she gripped the door frame. Rosa appeared at her side, concerned eyes taking in Catherine's ashen face. "Mrs. Brooks, are you all right?" Catherine composed herself quickly and signed, "I'm fine, just tired. Please tell them I'm not feeling well and need to rest." Rosa nodded, understanding instantly. She returned to the dining room to deliver the message while Catherine retreated to her bedroom, her mind reeling from what she had witnessed. Later that night, as the penthouse fell silent, Catherine sat at her vanity, staring at her reflection. The woman who gazed back had weathered many storms, building a business empire alongside William, raising two daughters, and adapting to a world without sound. She had survived it all with grace and dignity. But now, a new resolve hardened in her eyes. Tomorrow's surgery wasn't just about regaining her hearing. It was about uncovering the full truth of what had been happening behind her back. As she prepared for bed, Catherine realized that her deafness, long considered her greatest vulnerability, might soon become her most powerful advantage. For the first time in years, a smile played at the corners of her lips, not the polite, accommodating smile her family was accustomed to, but one of determination. They believed her isolated, diminished, and easy to manipulate. They had no idea what was coming. The alarm beside her bed was set to vibrate at 5 hours in the morning. The surgery was scheduled for 7:30. By this time tomorrow, Catherine Brooks would be hearing the world again, and her family would have no idea. Let them continue their scheming, their patronizing behavior, their secret conversations. Soon, very soon, nothing would escape her notice. She slipped under the silk sheets, her mind already formulating a plan. The hearing would return, but the silence would remain a strategic silence that would reveal exactly who her family had become in the shadows of her presumed disability. Tomorrow would be the beginning of her quiet revolution. The steady beeping of medical equipment filled the pristine room at the Hamilton Clinic, an exclusive medical facility nestled in the outskirts of the city. Catherine lay perfectly still on the operating table, her silver hair tucked neatly beneath a surgical cap. The anesthesia was beginning to take effect, creating a pleasant warmth that spread through her limbs. Dr. Nathan Chen's face appeared above her, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners as he spoke. "Count backward from 10, Mrs. Brooks," he instructed, his lips moving clearly enough for her to read. Catherine nodded slightly, her eyelids growing heavy. 10, 9, 8. The world faded to black as the surgical team prepared to perform the groundbreaking procedure that promised to reconnect her with the world of sound. Hours later, Catherine awoke in a private recovery suite, the afternoon sun casting dappled patterns through the blinds. Her head was bandaged, and a peculiar pressure filled her ears. Rosa sat vigilantly beside the bed, her weathered hands clutching a worn paperback novel. When she noticed Catherine stirring, she immediately set the book aside and leaned forward. "Mrs. Brooks," Rosa signed, her face etched with concern. "How are you feeling?" Catherine blinked slowly, taking inventory of her body. There was discomfort, but no real pain. Before she could respond, the door opened and Dr. Chen entered, clipboard in hand. Rosa stood respectfully, moving to the side to give the doctor space. "Mrs. Brooks," Dr. Chen said, his voice careful and measured as he approached the bed. "The procedure went extremely well, better than we anticipated. Actually," Catherine stared at him, suddenly realizing something extraordinary. She could hear him. The sound was muffled, as though she were underwater, but unmistakably present. After 12 years of silence, the human voice had returned to her world. Tears sprang to her eyes as she registered the soft hum of the air conditioning, the rustle of the doctor's lab coat, the gentle beeping of monitor sounds she had resigned herself to never experiencing again. "I can hear you," she whispered, her own voice strange to her ears. 12 years of speaking without auditory feedback had altered her speech patterns, making her words slightly slurred and her volume control imperfect. "I can actually hear you. Doctor..." Chen's face broke into a wide smile. That's excellent news. We weren't expecting auditory response this quickly. The microchip implants combined with the nerve regeneration therapy have clearly taken immediate effect. Rosa gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks as she witnessed the miracle unfolding before her. Oh, Mrs. Brooks, the sounds will be muffled for the next 24 to 48 hours. Dr. Chen continued, checking Catherine's vital signs. As the swelling decreases, clarity will improve dramatically. By this time tomorrow, you should be experiencing about 70% of normal hearing capacity, and within a week, we expect that to reach 90% or higher. Catherine couldn't stop the tears flowing freely down her face. I never truly believed, even when I decided to do this. I never really thought. Dr. Chen patted her hand gently. The technology has advanced tremendously in recent years. Your type of hearing loss was particularly suitable for this procedure. He adjusted one of the monitors and continued, Now, I must emphasize the importance of protecting your ears in these early days. Loud noises could be jarring and potentially damaging. Take things slowly. Reintroduce sounds gradually. Catherine nodded, still overwhelmed by the symphony of ordinary sounds filling the room, the soft squeak of the doctor's shoes against the floor, the distant chime of an elevator, the gentle clink of medical instruments. When can I go home? She asked, already thinking of her next steps. We'll keep you overnight for observation, but you should be able to leave tomorrow morning. Is there someone who can stay with you for the first few days? Rosa stepped forward. I'll be with her, Doctor. Dr. Chen nodded approvingly. Excellent. I'll be back to check on you this evening. For now, rest. Your brain is working overtime to process sensory input it hasn't received in years. After the doctor left, Catherine turned to Rosa, who was still wiping away tears of joy. Remember, not a word to anyone about this. As far as my family knows, I've been visiting my sister. Rosa nodded solemnly. Of course, Mrs. Brooks. But may I ask why this is miraculous news? Wouldn't your daughters be happy for you? Catherine's expression hardened slightly. Based on what I overheard at dinner last night, I'm not so sure. I need time to understand exactly what's been happening behind my back. The next morning, Catherine was discharged with a small bag of medications and strict instructions for follow-up care. As Rosa drove her back to the penthouse, Catherine marveled at sounds she had forgotten: the purr of the car engine, the gentle whoosh of tires against asphalt, the click of the turn signal. The world had become so much richer overnight. Painted with an auditory palette she had long resigned herself to living without. Your daughters called the house phone twice, Rosa mentioned as they approached the city skyline. I told them you were still with your sister and would be home today. Miss Ashley seemed particularly interested in when exactly you'd return. Catherine nodded, gazing out the window. I'm sure she was. When they arrived at the penthouse, Catherine carefully removed her hearing aids before entering. Dr. Chen had provided them as a precaution to help modulate sound levels as she adjusted. For now, they would serve a dual-purpose protection and disguise. To the outside world, she would remain deaf, reliant on lip reading and written communication. But beneath this facade, she would be absorbing every whisper, every aside, every secret conversation. Rosa, Catherine said as they settled in the living room, I need you to act exactly as before. Continue signing. Have me write notes to you occasionally when others are present. Nothing can seem different. Rosa frowned slightly. For how long, Mrs. Brooks? Until I discover the full extent of what my family has been doing. James mentioned moving money from my accounts. I need to know everything. That afternoon, Catherine called her longtime attorney, Edward Walsh, asking him to come to the penthouse immediately. When he arrived, his tall frame stooped slightly with age, She revealed her newly regained hearing and swore him to secrecy before explaining her suspicions. I want a complete audit of all my accounts, properties, and holdings, she instructed, her voice firm. Discreetly, if anything has been moved or accessed improperly, I want to know. Edward adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his expression grave. I'll have my team start immediately. If James Wilson has been embezzling funds, we'll find the evidence. And I want to change my will, Catherine added, pacing the room. But don't file it yet. Prepare the documents, but keep them in your office safe until I give the word. After Edward left, promising results within days, Catherine sat alone in William's old study, running her fingers over the mahogany desk where he had conducted business for decades. "Oh, William," she whispered to the empty room, hearing her own voice with a clarity that still startled her. "What would you make of all this?" The intercom buzzed, and Rosa's voice came through. "Mrs. Brooks, Miss Ashley and Mr. Wilson are here to see you." Catherine quickly removed her hearing aids, tucking them into her pocket. She took a deep breath, composing her features into the placid expression her family expected. "Send them in," she responded, deliberately making her voice slightly too loud, as she had done for years. Ashley swept into the study, James following closely behind. Both were dressed impeccably as always, Ashley in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people earned in a month, James in a tailored suit that screamed old money and privilege. "Mother," Ashley mouthed exaggeratedly, bending to kiss Catherine's cheek. "How was Chicago? We were worried when you left so suddenly." Catherine reached for her notepad, writing lovely visit. "My sister sends her regards." As she wrote, she could hear Ashley's impatient sigh, the soft tap of her manicured nails against her phone screen, the almost imperceptible whisper to James, "Let's make this quick. I have a charity luncheon at 2. The realization that she could hear these small, revealing moments sent a surge of emotion through Catherine, part vindication, part deep sadness. For years, she had imagined her daughter's concern when they visited, interpreted their expressions as loving. Now the curtain had been pulled back, revealing the uncomfortable truth behind their attentiveness. James settled into the leather chair across from her, his charming smile firmly in place. "Catherine," he began, enunciating carefully as though speaking to a child, "we've been going over some of the business portfolios. There are several properties that aren't performing well. They're costing you money rather than generating income." Catherine tilted her head, playing the role of the confused elderly mother. She wrote which properties, the commercial buildings downtown and 2 of the Hamptons houses. James replied smoothly, "We think it would be wise to transfer them to Ashley and Melissa's names now. They can handle the headache, and it would reduce your estate tax burden significantly." Catherine could hear the slight tremor in his voice, the tell of a practiced liar. The downtown properties were among her most profitable holdings, generating millions in rental income annually. The underperforming Hamptons houses had recently been appraised at $7 million each. She wrote, "I'll think about it. Need to consult with Edward first." James's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at the mention of her attorney. "Edward is getting on in years, Catherine. His understanding of modern tax strategy is limited. I'd be happy to meet with him, explain our thinking." Ashley placed a hand on Catherine's shoulder, her voice honey-sweet but with an underlying edge that Catherine had never been able to detect before. "Mother, we're just trying to help. You have so much to manage, and with your condition, it must be overwhelming." Catherine nodded meekly, allowing them to believe she was considering their proposal. She wrote thoughtful children. "We'll discuss with Edward next week," after they left, promising to return for Sunday dinner with Melissa and Daniel. Catherine stood at the window overlooking the city she and William had conquered together. the empire they had built from nothing, starting with a single rundown apartment building and expanding to dozens of premium properties across 3 states. Their legacy, the inheritance meant to secure their daughters' futures, not fund their extravagant lifestyles while Catherine was still alive. Rosa entered silently, placing a cup of tea on the side table. "They've gone, Mrs. Brooks." Catherine turned, retrieving her hearing aids from her pocket. As she put them in, the world became even clearer, the gentle clink of the teacup against the saucer, the distant hum of traffic below, Rosa's concerned breathing. "They're trying to take everything, Rosa," Catherine said quietly. "Not just money from accounts. They want the properties transferred before I can change my will." She shook her head, a bitter smile crossing her lips. "Little do they know, I've already begun." That night, as Catherine lay in bed, listening to the forgotten symphony of nighttime sounds, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the soft whir of the climate control system, the occasional car horn from the street below, she formulated her plan. Sunday dinner would be just the beginning. She would need patience, evidence, and perfect timing. Her family believed they were orchestrating a masterful scheme to secure their financial futures. They had no idea they were walking into a trap of Catherine's making, one that would expose not just their actions, but the true nature of their characters. As she drifted off to sleep, lulled by the sounds she had missed for so long, Catherine felt a strange sense of peace. The truth, however painful, was always preferable to illusion. By the time she was finished, everyone's true colors would be revealed, including her own. Sunday arrived with a pristine blue sky and a gentle breeze that rustled the ornamental trees on Catherine's penthouse terrace. For the third consecutive day, she had awoken to the miraculous symphony of morning sounds bird song from outside her window, the distant hum of weekend traffic, the soft footfalls of Rosa preparing breakfast in the kitchen. Each new sound was a gift, a reconnection with a world she had feared lost forever. Catherine sat at her vanity, carefully applying her makeup with the practiced precision of a woman who had maintained her appearance impeccably despite personal tragedies. The face that looked back at her from the mirror showed few signs of her 68-year silver hair styled in elegant waves, skin remarkably smooth save for fine lines around her eyes that spoke of both laughter and tears. "Mrs. Brooks," Rosa called from the doorway. "Edward is on the phone. He says it's urgent." Catherine nodded, reaching for the receiver. Since regaining her hearing, phone conversations had become possible again, though she kept this development strictly between herself, Rosa, and her attorney. "Edward," she said, her voice measured and calm. "What have you found?" The attorney's voice came through clearly, his professional tone tinged with unmistakable anger. "It's worse than we suspected, Catherine. James has been systematically transferring funds from your investment accounts to offshore holdings for the past 14 months. Small amounts initially, but increasingly larger sums. The total is just over $2 million. Catherine's hand tightened on the receiver, but her expression remained impassive. "The evidence, irrefutable. He used your power of attorney to authorize the transfers, claiming they were for property renovations and maintenance. But we've verified with the management companies those renovations never happened." "What about my daughters? Are their names on any of these transactions?" Edward paused before responding. "Ashley's is. She co-signed on several of the larger transfers. Melissa's name doesn't appear anywhere, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's unaware." A cold weight settled in Catherine's stomach. She had held out hope that perhaps Ashley was merely under James's influence, that her eldest daughter wasn't actively participating in the theft. That hope now withered and died. "I've prepared the new will as you requested," Edward continued, "and I've taken the liberty of drafting the documents to revoke James's power of attorney. effective immediately. I can bring everything over tomorrow morning for your signature. Thank you, Edward, and the other matter we discussed. The trust restructuring is complete. Once you sign the documents, your monthly distributions to family members can be modified or terminated at your discretion without further paperwork. Excellent. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. After hanging up, Catherine sat motionless, absorbing the confirmation of her worst fears. The betrayal cut deeper than she had anticipated. Pierce, she could almost understand he had always been an opportunist, marrying Ashley more for her family connections than love. But Ashley herself actively participating in stealing from her mother, that wound would not heal easily. Rosa appeared with a cup of tea, her face etched with concern. Bad news, confirmation of what we suspected, Catherine replied, accepting the tea gratefully. $2 million. Rosa, stolen while I sat in silence, unable to hear their schemes. Rosa placed a comforting hand on Catherine's shoulder. What will you do now? Catherine's eyes hardened as she looked out toward the terrace, where the family would gather in a few hours. Watch, listen, and then, when the moment is right, act decisively. The family began arriving at 4 o'clock for the weekly Sunday dinner tradition that had become more frequent since William's death. Melissa and Daniel arrived first, bringing an expensive bottle of wine that Catherine recognized as coming from her own cellar collection, likely borrowed during a previous visit. Mother, Melissa mouthed carefully, embracing Catherine with a perfunctory hug. You look well, Catherine nodded, patting Melissa's cheek affectionately, while noting the new diamond earrings adorning her younger daughter's ears, earrings that almost certainly had been purchased with misappropriated funds. She reached for her notepad, writing lovely to see you both. Make yourselves comfortable. As Melissa and Daniel moved toward the living room, Catherine could hear their whispered conversation perfectly. Did you talk to Ashley? Daniel asked, his voice low and urgent. About the offshore account access. Melissa nodded slightly. She says everything's on track. Once Mom signs the property transfer papers, we'll have leverage to get our names added to the bigger accounts. Good. The business loan is due next month, and we're still $300,000 short. Your mother's money is our only option unless you want to sell the house. Catherine turned away, her face a careful mask concealing the storm of emotions beneath. So, Melissa and Daniel were aware of the scheme, perhaps not active participants in the embezzlement, but certainly planning to benefit from the broader plan to gain control of her assets. Ashley and James arrived 20 minutes later, bringing their usual energy of barely concealed impatience. Ashley was dressed immaculately in a designer outfit that Catherine estimated cost upwards of $5,000. James carried a leather portfolio that immediately set Catherine's nerves on edge. Paperwork, no doubt, for her to sign. Mother, Ashley exclaimed with exaggerated clarity, air-kissing Catherine's cheeks. I've brought the property documents we discussed. Very simple, just a few signatures needed. Catherine smiled placidly, gesturing toward the dining room where Rosa was setting out appetizers. She wrote on her notepad, "After dinner, let's enjoy family time first." James's expression tightened momentarily before he forced a smile. Of course, Catherine, no rush at all. As they gathered around the dining table, Catherine observed her family with new clarity. Without the impediment of deafness, the dynamics were starkly apparent. The impatient glances exchanged between Ashley and James whenever she took too long to respond to a question. The condescending way Daniel over-explained simple concepts as though she were intellectually as well as hearing impaired. The way Melissa checked her phone every few minutes, clearly bored by the obligation of dining with her mother. So, Mother, Ashley began once the main course had been served, have you given any more thought to our discussion about the properties? Catherine tilted her head questioningly, pretending not to fully understand. She wrote, which properties? Ashley's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. The ones we talked about transferring to Melissa and me? The underperforming properties that are causing you tax burdens. Catherine nodded slowly, then wrote, Edward mentioned something different about those properties. Very profitable, he said. The reaction around the table was immediate. James's fork paused midway to his mouth. Ashley's smile froze in place. Melissa and Daniel exchanged alarmed glances. Well, James recovered smoothly. Edward isn't privy to all the financial details. I've been managing those properties more directly, and I can assure you they're becoming liabilities. Catherine could hear the slight elevation in his breathing, the telltale sign of a lie. She wrote, Interesting. Edward showed me the income reports yesterday. $7 million in rental revenue last quarter. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Ashley reached for her wine glass, taking a longer sip than necessary. Mother, these financial details must be so confusing for you. Why don't you let us handle everything you deserve to enjoy your retirement without these stresses? The condescension in her daughter's voice made Catherine's blood simmer, but she maintained her serene expression. She wrote, Perhaps you're right. So much to keep track of. All those accounts, properties, investments. James leaned forward, sensing an opening. Exactly. Catherine, that's why we want to help. Starting with transferring those problematic properties, I have the papers right here. He reached for the portfolio he'd brought. Catherine held up her hand, then wrote deliberately, After dinner, and I'd like Edward to review first. Edward is getting quite elderly. Mother, Ashley interjected quickly. His understanding of modern estate planning is outdated. James has consulted with the top experts who recommended moving money to offshore accounts, Catherine wrote, then watched their reactions carefully. The effect was electric. James's face drained of color. Ashley's wineglass froze halfway to her lips. Daniel's eyes widened in alarm, and Melissa suddenly became intensely interested in her plate. I don't know what you mean, James said finally, his voice steady but his eyes betraying panic. Catherine smiled enigmatically and wrote, Just something Edward mentioned. Probably misunderstood. My mistake. The tension around the table was palpable as they finished dinner in relative silence. Catherine could hear their accelerated breathing, the whispered, later, from James to Ashley, the nervous tap of Daniel's foot against the chair leg. For the first time, she had introduced doubt into their perfectly orchestrated plan, a suggestion that perhaps isolated Catherine wasn't quite as oblivious as they had assumed. After dinner, they moved to the living room for coffee. James, recovering his composure, once again produced the property transfer documents. Nothing complicated, Catherine, just a simple transfer of deed to alleviate your tax burden. Catherine examined the papers with deliberate slowness, turning pages and appearing to read carefully. In reality, she had already spotted the deception. The simple transfer included not just the two Hamptons properties they had discussed, but 3 additional high-value commercial buildings and her beloved lake house in Vermont. She wrote, These include more properties than we discussed. James smiled smoothly. For maximum tax advantage, our advisors recommended grouping the transfers. It's all quite standard. Catherine nodded thoughtfully, then wrote, I'll have Edward review these tomorrow. He's coming at 9. Tomorrow, Ashley interjected, her voice sharper than intended. Mother, these need to be filed by end of business Monday for the quarterly tax advantage. There's really no time for Edward's review. Such urgency for something supposedly routine. Catherine wrote, watching their expressions carefully. An uncomfortable silence followed, broken by Daniel attempting to change the subject. The garden looks beautiful. Catherine, those new rose bushes must have cost a fortune. Speaking of money, Catherine wrote boldly, Has anyone seen the statement for my investment account? The one James manages, Edward mentioned some discrepancies. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly from uncomfortable to glacial. James cleared his throat. What sort of discrepancies? Missing funds. Catherine wrote simply, her gaze unwavering as she studied their reactions. Ashley jumped in, her voice artificially light. Mother, there must be some misunderstanding. James handles everything meticulously. Yes, James agreed quickly. Perhaps Edward is looking at outdated statements. I moved some investments to higher yield accounts recently, completely documented. Of course. Of course, Catherine wrote, her face a mask of polite interest. The evening concluded earlier than usual, with transparent excuses about early meetings and children's activities. As the elevator doors closed behind her family, Catherine turned to Rosa, who had been observing quietly from the periphery. Did you hear all that? Catherine asked, inserting her hearing aids. Rosa nodded grimly. Every word, Mrs. Brooks. They're scared now. Good, Catherine replied, moving to the window to watch as her family exited the building below. Through the perfect acoustics of her hearing aids, she could detect James's angry phone call from the sidewalk, his voice carrying up through the open terrace doors. She knows something, he was saying urgently. We need to accelerate the plan, get the rest of the money moved this week before she can make changes. Catherine smiled grimly. They're planning their next move, Rosa, but so am I. The following morning, Edward arrived promptly at 9 with a thick folder of documents. His gray eyes were sharp behind his glasses, his handshake firm despite his 70-plus years. The evidence is conclusive. Catherine, he said, spreading financial statements across the desk. James has been systematically draining smaller accounts, moving funds through a series of offshore holdings. The pattern suggests he was working up to larger transfers, testing to see if anyone would notice. He pointed to a series of highlighted transactions. Here, we have withdrawals from your personal accounts being funneled through shell companies in the Cayman Islands, then redistributed to investment accounts under James's control. Sophisticated money laundering techniques? Really? And Ashley? Catherine asked, her voice steady despite the pain coursing through her. Edward's expression softened with sympathy. Her signature is on these 4 transfers, each for $100,000. There's no ambiguity. I'm afraid. Catherine nodded, absorbing the betrayal with remarkable composure. Show me the documentation for the property transfers they're proposing. Edward produced another set of documents, explaining the hidden clauses that would effectively give James management control over the properties while transferring ownership to her daughters. This clause here is particularly concerning, Edward pointed out. It grants power of attorney over all transferred assets to the designated family representative, which, according to this writer, would be James. He'd have complete control without the burden of actual ownership. And the new arrangements I requested? Catherine asked. All prepared, Edward confirmed, producing another set of documents. Once you sign these, your daughter's monthly allowances will be placed in a discretionary trust under your sole control. The company cars, credit cards, property access, all can be revoked with a single phone call from you. And the new will is drastically different from the current one, as you requested. The bulk of the estate goes to your charitable foundation with modest trust funds for your daughters that they can only access at age 60 or in case of genuine medical emergency. The property holdings remain intact under foundation management. Catherine signed each document with a steady hand, her signature as elegant and controlled as ever. With each stroke of the pen, she was reclaiming the power that had been taken from her not by deafness, but by the betrayal of those she had trusted most. My team has already begun the process of recovering the misappropriated funds, Edward continued. It's complicated by the international nature of the transfers, but we've engaged forensic accountants who specialize in asset recovery. The initial phase involves freezing the offshore accounts, which should be completed by end of day. Will James be notified when that happens? Eventually, yes. The banks are required to send notification, but there's typically a 48-hour lag. We should have everything in place before he realizes what's happening. And the legal implications? Catherine asked. Edward's expression grew serious. What James has done constitutes criminal fraud. Catherine, you would have every right to press charges. She shook her head. Not yet. Let's see how this plays out first. After Edward left with the signed documents, Catherine spent the afternoon reviewing everything she had learned. The systematic theft was even more calculated than she had imagined, with transactions dating back almost 18 months, beginning shortly after James had convinced her to grant him limited power of attorney to help manage the day-to-day financial matters that must be so tedious for you. The doorbell rang at 3 o'clock, interrupting her thoughts. Rosa appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Brooks, Miss Melissa is here. She seems upset. Catherine quickly removed her hearing aids, tucking them into her pocket. Send her in. Melissa entered, her usual carefully maintained appearance slightly disheveled. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she clutched her designer handbag with white-knuckled intensity. Mother, she began, forgetting to exaggerate her mouth movements for Catherine's benefit. I had to see you. She stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. Catherine tilted her head questioningly and reached for her notepad. I'm sorry, Melissa said, this time speaking more clearly. I just needed to talk to you. Catherine wrote, What's wrong? You seem upset. Melissa sank onto the sofa, uncharacteristically vulnerable. Ashley and James are fighting. I overheard them this morning when I stopped by their house. Something about money and accounts being frozen. James was furious. Catherine kept her expression neutral as she wrote, What accounts? I don't know exactly, but James said something about offshore holdings being compromised, and he blamed Ashley for being sloppy with the paperwork. Then Ashley said it must be Edward's doing. Melissa looked directly at Catherine. What's going on? Mother, is there something wrong with your finances? Edward mentioned some irregularities. Catherine wrote, He's looking into it. Melissa's reaction was telling a flash of panic quickly masked by concern. What kind of irregularities should we be worried? Perhaps, Catherine wrote, deliberately vague. Edward says significant funds are missing. Melissa paled visibly. Missing? How do you think someone stole from you? Catherine fixed her daughter with a penetrating gaze as she wrote, Edward believes someone with access to my accounts has been transferring money without authorization. He's tracking the transactions now. That's terrible, Melissa stammered. Do they know who did it? They have signatures on the transfers, Catherine wrote, watching her daughter's reaction carefully. Melissa stood abruptly. I should go. I need to talk to Daniel. We'll get to the bottom of this. Mother. As Melissa hurried out, Catherine retrieved her hearing aids and turned to Rosa, who had been observing from the doorway. She's going straight to warn Daniel, Catherine said. And then they'll all panic together. Are you sure this is the best approach? Mrs. Brooks? Rosa asked. They seemed genuinely frightened. Good, Catherine replied, her voice firm but tinged with sadness. They should be. They've stolen from me, lied to me, and treated me like an imbecile for years. Fear is the least of what they deserve. Later that evening, Catherine's phone rang incessantly. First Ashley, then James, then Ashley again. She instructed Rosa to tell them she was resting and couldn't be disturbed. Let them stew in their uncertainty a while longer. As Catherine prepared for bed, she heard Rosa speaking at the front door. A moment later, her housekeeper appeared. Mr. Wilson was just here in person, Rosa reported. I told him you were asleep, but he insisted on leaving this. She handed Catherine an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Catherine, I understand there may be some confusion about the financial arrangements I've been managing on your behalf. I assure you everything has been done with your best interests at heart. Perhaps there's been a miscommunication with Edward, who may not fully understand the complexities of modern portfolio management. I've taken the liberty of scheduling a meeting with our financial team tomorrow at 10 a.m. to clear everything up. I'll pick you up at 9:30. James Catherine smiled grimly as she put the note aside. He's scrambling now. Rosa, trying to control the narrative before everything falls apart. Will you go to this meeting? No, Catherine replied. But I will be hosting my own meeting very soon, one where all the cards will finally be laid on the table. The next 3 days passed in a storm of activity that went entirely unnoticed by Catherine's family. Edward's team worked with surgical precision, documenting every unauthorized transaction, changing account access protocols, and implementing the new trust structures that would fundamentally alter the financial dynamics of the Brooks family. Security firms were discreetly contracted to change locks and access codes at all properties. Financial advisors prepared detailed analyses of every asset in Catherine's considerable portfolio. Her private banker personally oversaw the creation of new accounts with sophisticated security protocols that would prevent unauthorized access. Through it all, Catherine maintained her facade of deaf vulnerability, communicating with her daughters via brief text messages that gave no hint of the seismic shifts occurring beneath the surface. She declined all in-person visits, citing a mild cold a convenient excuse to avoid direct confrontation until everything was in place. On Wednesday afternoon, Catherine sat in Dr. Nathan Chin's office for her one-week follow-up appointment, a small smile playing at her lips as he reviewed her test results. Remarkable, Dr. Chin said, genuine amazement in his voice. Your auditory recovery has exceeded our most optimistic projections. You're currently testing at 95% of normal hearing capacity across all frequencies. For someone who was profoundly deaf for 12 years, these results are nothing short of miraculous. Catherine nodded, her hands folded calmly in her lap. The sounds are so clear now, even better than I remember from before. The neural pathways have adapted exceptionally well, Dr. Chen explained, setting aside her chart. And how are you adjusting psychologically? Reintegrating sound can be overwhelming for long-term deaf patients. It's been, Catherine paused, searching for the right words. Illuminating. I'm hearing things I never expected to hear. Dr. Chen nodded sympathetically, misinterpreting her meaning. That's common. Many patients report being surprised by sounds they'd forgotten: refrigerator hums, clock ticks, their own footsteps. Yes, those too, Catherine agreed, not bothering to explain that the most surprising sounds had been the calculating discussions of her family when they thought she couldn't hear them. Have you told your family yet? Dr. Chen asked. Support from loved ones is crucial during this transition. Catherine's expression remained placid, betraying none of the turmoil beneath. Not yet. I'm waiting for the right moment. When she returned home, Edward was waiting in the study, a satisfied gleam in his eyes. We've recovered 1.8 million of the missing funds, he announced without preamble. The remaining amount is tied up in investments that James made, but we should be able to liquidate those within 30 days. In the meantime, all of his access to your accounts has been revoked. Has he noticed yet? Oh, yes. He called my office 4 times today, increasingly frantic. I've instructed my assistant to tell him I'm in court and unavailable until Friday. Catherine smiled. Perfect. That's when I want to do this. Friday evening, family dinner. I want everyone here. Edward raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's wise together? They might present a united front. That's exactly what I want, Catherine replied. I need to see them all together, to understand who's a mastermind and who's a follower. Besides, she added with a coldness that surprised even herself, it will be more efficient this way. After Edward left, Catherine asked Rosa to extend dinner invitations to both daughters and their husbands for Friday at 7 o'clock. Tell them I have important financial matters to discuss, she instructed. Make it clear that attendance is not optional. All of them together. Are you sure that's wise? Rosa echoed Edward's concern. Absolutely. Catherine's voice carried a steely determination that brooked no argument. It's time to end this charade. On Friday night, everyone's masks will come off, including mine. Thursday passed in a blur of final preparations. Edward delivered the last of the paperwork, irrefutable documentation of every fraudulent transaction, complete with authenticated signatures and bank confirmations. The security company reported that all locks and access codes had been changed at Catherine's properties across the country. Her financial team confirmed that all credit cards issued on her accounts to family members could be deactivated with a single call. Catherine reviewed everything meticulously, preparing herself for every possible reaction, every denial, every counter-accusation. She was under no illusions about how ugly the confrontation might become. These were not just any adversaries, they were her flesh and blood, people who knew her vulnerabilities and would not hesitate to exploit them. That night, she found herself standing before William's portrait in the living room, seeking counsel from the only person who had ever truly had her best interests at heart. Am I doing the right thing? William, she whispered to the silent canvas. Is there another way? The painting offered no answers, just William's steady gaze and slight smile, the same expression he had worn when facing business competitors who had underestimated him. It was a look that said, I know something you don't, and soon you'll know it too. Catherine straightened her shoulders. Yes, this was the right path. Difficult, painful, but necessary. Friday morning dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself approved of Catherine's plans. She spent the day in unusual activities, directing Rosa in preparing an elaborate meal, selecting the perfect wine from William's cellar, arranging fresh flowers throughout the penthouse. You seem almost excited, Mrs. Brooks, Rosa observed as they set the dining table with the finest china and crystal. Not excited, Rosa, resolved. Catherine carefully placed William's favorite sterling silver candlesticks at the center of the table. Tonight is not a celebration, it's a reckoning. At 6:30, Catherine retired to her bedroom to prepare herself. She chose a striking sapphire blue dress that complemented her silver hair and brought out the steel in her eyes. Around her neck, she fastened the diamond pendant William had given her on their 40th anniversary, a talisman of strength for what lay ahead. As she applied her makeup, Catherine studied her reflection in the vanity mirror. The woman who gazed back had weathered many storms over the years, the loss of her hearing, the death of her beloved husband, and now the betrayal of her children. Yet somehow, she looked stronger than ever, her eyes clear and determined, her bearing regal. They're here, Mrs. Brooks, Rosa announced at precisely 7 o'clock. All four of them, arriving together. Catherine nodded, smoothing her dress one final time. Show them in, Rosa, and remember, until I give the signal, nothing has changed. I'm still deaf to them. The family entered with uncharacteristic hesitation, their usual confident demeanor replaced by wary calculation. Ashley led the way, dressed immaculately as always, though Catherine noted her daughter's white-knuckled grip on her designer handbag. James followed, his corporate smile firmly in place, but strain evident around his eyes. Melissa and Daniel entered last, both looking distinctly uncomfortable. Mother, Ashley greeted with exaggerated clarity, kissing Catherine's cheek. You look lovely tonight. Special occasion? Catherine smiled enigmatically and wrote on her notepad, Family is always a special occasion. Shall we eat first, or would you prefer to discuss business immediately? The four exchanged glances before James stepped forward. Perhaps we should clear the air first. Catherine, there seems to be some misunderstanding about the financial arrangements. Catherine nodded and gestured toward the living room, where she had arranged documents on the coffee table. As they seated themselves, she could hear their accelerated breathing, the nervous tap of Ashley's heel against the hardwood floor, the whispered, "Let me handle this," from James to Daniel. James began his well-rehearsed explanation, his voice smooth with practiced sincerity. Catherine, Edward may have misinterpreted some of the financial movements in your accounts. Yes, I've transferred funds between various holdings, but always with the goal of maximizing your returns and minimizing tax exposure. These offshore accounts are perfectly legal tax havens used by wealthy families worldwide. Catherine watched him impassively, then wrote, and the $2.3 million temporary transfers, James replied without missing a beat. Capital being positioned for a major investment opportunity. Every penny is accounted for and working for your benefit. Ashley leaned forward, her expression earnest. Mother, you know we would never do anything to harm you financially. Everything we've done has been to protect your estate, our family legacy. Catherine wrote, Then you won't mind if we review the documents together. She gestured to the stack of papers on the table. A flicker of alarm crossed James's face. These are complex financial instruments. Catherine, without the proper background, they can be very confusing. Try me, Catherine wrote, her expression challenging. For the next 20 minutes, James attempted to explain away the damning evidence Edward had compiled, weaving an increasingly convoluted narrative of investment strategies and tax planning. Throughout his explanation, Catherine remained silent, watching as he dug himself deeper with each deception. Finally, when James finished his elaborate justification, Catherine stood up and walked to the bar cart in the corner of the room. She poured herself a small measure of William's favorite scotch, feeling 4 pairs of eyes tracking her movements with growing confusion. Mrs. Brooks, Rosa said from the doorway, right on cue. Shall I serve dinner now? Catherine turned to face her family, taking a small sip of the scotch before responding. Not in writing, but in a clear, steady voice. I think we'll wait a bit longer. Rosa, we're just getting to the interesting part. The effect was instantaneous. 4 pairs of eyes widened in shock. Ashley's mouth fell open. James froze mid-gesture. Daniel actually stood up in surprise before awkwardly sitting back down. Mother, Melissa whispered. You can hear us, Catherine replied, her voice calm and measured. I've been able to hear everything for over a week now. Every whisper, every aside, every plan discussed when you thought I couldn't possibly know what you were saying. But how? Ashley stammered, her composure shattered. An experimental procedure, Catherine explained, moving back to her seat with deliberate grace. Microchip implants combined with nerve regeneration therapy. Quite revolutionary. Dr. Chen believes it might help thousands of people with hearing loss similar to mine. And you didn't tell us. Ashley's voice carried an accusatory tone that made Catherine's eyebrows rise. Why would I? Catherine asked softly. So you could be more careful about what you said behind my back, so James could be sure to make his calls about offshore accounts from a safer distance. James attempted to regain control of the situation. Catherine, I understand this must seem suspicious, but if you'll allow me to explain— Enough! Catherine cut him off, her voice sharper now. I've heard all your explanations. James, I've listened to you plot with my daughter to steal my money. I've heard you discuss which properties to take first. I've heard you call me a confused old woman who won't notice what you're doing. She turned to Ashley. I heard you complain about how exhausting it is to communicate with your deaf mother. How inconvenient my disability has been for you. How eager you are for me to sign everything over so you don't have to pretend to care anymore. Ashley's face flushed red. That's not fair. You're taking things out of context. Am I? Catherine countered. Then let me provide some context. Edward has documented 67 unauthorized transfers from my accounts over the past 14 months, totaling $2,300,000. 43 of these transfers bear your signature, Ashley, not James's, yours. She turned to Melissa and Daniel. And while you two may not have actively stolen from me, I heard you discussing how to use the property transfers as leverage to gain access to my larger accounts. I heard Daniel mention using my money to cover the $300,000 business loan that's coming due. Melissa began to cry, mascara tracking down her cheeks. Mother, please, we were desperate. The business was failing, and we didn't know where else to turn. You could have asked me, Catherine said, her voice softening slightly. I would have helped you openly, legally, without the need for manipulation and lies. A heavy silence fell over the room. James, ever the strategist, was the first to recover. What happens now, Catherine? What do you want from us? Catherine set down her glass and folded her hands in her lap. As of this morning, several things have changed. First, James no longer has power of attorney over any of my affairs. Edward has revoked all access to my accounts. The $2 million has been recovered from the offshore holdings and returned to my primary accounts. She paused, making eye contact with each family member before continuing. Second, I've established a new trust structure. The monthly allowances you've all enjoyed $5,000 each for Ashley and Melissa, company cars, credit cards, access to vacation properties, all of that now falls under a discretionary trust that I control entirely. You're cutting us off, Ashley asked incredulously. Effective immediately, Catherine confirmed. The company cars will be collected tomorrow morning. The credit cards have already been deactivated. The security codes at all properties will be changed by noon. You can't do this, James protested, his composure finally cracking. We have rights. We've built lives around those resources. Resources you were actively stealing, Catherine reminded him coldly. Consider yourselves fortunate that I'm not pressing criminal charges for the embezzlement. Edward advised me to do exactly that, particularly in your case, James. This is insane, Daniel interjected. You're punishing us all because of James and Ashley's actions. Melissa and I weren't involved in the transfers. But you knew, Catherine replied simply. You knew, and you planned to benefit. You discussed it openly in my presence, believing I couldn't hear you. She stood again, moving to the window that overlooked the city lights. For 12 years, I lived in silence, trusting that my family would protect my interests, honor the legacy your father and I built. Instead, you saw my disability as an opportunity to enrich yourselves. Turning back to face them, Catherine's expression hardened. Starting tomorrow, you will all learn what it means to support yourselves without the Brooks fortune backing you. Get jobs, earn your own way, discover the value of what you've taken for granted. And if we refuse, Ashley challenged, her voice thick with emotion, then you'll have nothing. Catherine stated simply, the new will I signed this morning leaves the bulk of my estate to the charitable foundation. Only if you demonstrate genuine change over the next year will I consider reinstating your inheritances. James stood abruptly. This is emotional blackmail. You can't hold your money over our heads like this. Actually, I can. Catherine replied calmly, "It's my money, James. Money that William and I earned through decades of hard work and careful investment. Money you tried to steal." She moved toward the dining room. "Now, Rosa has prepared a lovely dinner. You're welcome to stay and eat, or you can leave. The choice is yours. But understand this, the financial dynamics of this family have changed permanently. How we proceed from here is entirely up to you." Without waiting for their response, Catherine walked into the dining room, her head held high, her steps measured and confident. Behind her, she could hear the stunned silence of her family as they faced a future suddenly stripped of financial certainty, a future where, for the first time in their adult lives, they would have to make their own way without the safety net of Catherine's fortune. The reckoning had begun. The morning after Catherine's revelation dawned crisp and clear, the autumn sunshine streaming through the penthouse windows with unforgiving brightness. Catherine sat at the breakfast table, savoring the sounds that once again filled her world, the gentle clink of her teacup against its saucer, the rustle of newspaper pages as she read the financial section, the distant hum of city traffic 30 floors below. These ordinary sounds had become extraordinary gifts, each one a reminder of what she had regained. Rosa entered with fresh toast, her steps deliberately heavier than usual, an old habit from when she needed to alert Catherine to her presence. "Mrs. Brooks," Edward called. "The security changes at all properties have been completed, and the company cars have been retrieved from Mr. Wilson and Mr. Carter." "Thank you, Rosa," Catherine replied, folding the newspaper carefully. "Any word from my daughters?" "Miss Melissa called twice this morning. She was quite upset. Miss Ashley sent a text message, rather terse, I'm afraid." Catherine nodded, unsurprised. Last night's dinner had concluded in strained silence after her announcement. James and Ashley had departed immediately, refusing to stay for the meal, their expressions a mixture of fury and disbelief. Melissa and Daniel had remained, picking at their food while attempting awkward conversation, as though they could somehow normalize the seismic shift that had just occurred. "What happens now, Mrs. Brooks?" Rosa asked, her voice gentle as she poured more tea. Catherine gazed out at the city skyline, considering the question. "Now we wait. Rosa, people reveal their true character not when life is easy, but when they face genuine adversity. My family has never known adversity. Perhaps it's time they did." The weeks that followed unfolded exactly as Catherine had anticipated. James was the first to crack under the pressure of financial reality. Without access to Brooks' funds, his carefully cultivated image of success began to crumble, his luxury car repossessed. His credit cards declined. His country club membership lapsed. Each loss was another blow to his ego. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Ashley appeared at the penthouse, her designer outfit replaced by simpler attire, her usual perfect makeup slightly less polished. "Mother," she began as she settled onto the sofa across from Catherine, "I've come to apologize." Catherine regarded her eldest daughter with a measured gaze, saying nothing, allowing the uncomfortable silence to stretch between them. "What happened with the accounts was wrong," Ashley continued, her voice strained. "I should never have signed those transfer documents. James convinced me they were temporary moves, strategic repositioning. He called it, I knew better, but I went along with it." "Why?" Catherine asked simply. Ashley's composure faltered slightly. "Because it was easy. Because we'd grown accustomed to a certain lifestyle." She hesitated, then continued more quietly. "Because James threatened to leave if I didn't help him. Our marriage has been struggling for years. Mother, the money was the only thing holding us together." Catherine absorbed this confession, noting the absence of genuine remorse for the betrayal itself. Ashley was sorry for the consequences, not for the actions that had brought them about. "Where is James now?" Catherine inquired, though she already knew the answer from Edward's reports. "Gone," Ashley replied, a bitter edge to her voice. "He left last week. Said if he couldn't access your money, there was no point in staying. 20 years of marriage, and that's what it came down to." Despite everything, Catherine felt a pang of sympathy for her daughter. "I'm sorry your marriage ended that way, Ashley, truly." "Are you?" Ashley challenged, a flash of her old defiance returning. "Isn't this exactly what you wanted to punish us all?" "No," Catherine replied calmly. "What I wanted was honesty, respect, a family that valued me for more than my money. The punishment you're experiencing now is simply the natural consequence of your own choices." Ashley's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I need help. Mother, I've never had to support myself before. I don't even know where to begin." Catherine studied her daughter thoughtfully. Behind the entitlement and manipulation, she glimpsed something she hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. Perhaps there was hope for Ashley after all. "Edward has arranged an entry-level position at Brooks Properties," Catherine said finally. "Assistant to the marketing director. The pay is modest but fair. You'll report to work like everyone else. Be evaluated on your performance like everyone else. No special treatment." "You want me to work for the company?" Ashley asked incredulously. "As an assistant. I want you to earn your way for once in your life." Catherine corrected her. "To understand the value of honest work. To appreciate what your father and I built from nothing." After a long moment, Ashley nodded reluctantly. "When do I start?" "Monday, 8 o'clock sharp. Don't be late." As Ashley left, Catherine wondered if her daughter would actually show up on Monday, or if her pride would prevent her from accepting such a humbling position. The answer came at 8:15 Monday morning when Edward called to inform her that Ashley had arrived at the office 15 minutes late, but present nonetheless. It was a small step, but a step in the right direction. Melissa and Daniel's situation evolved differently. With their business loan coming due and no Brooks funds to cover it, they faced the very real possibility of bankruptcy. The boutique marketing agency they had started 3 years ago had never been profitable, sustained only by Catherine's regular infusions of capital that they had positioned as investments. 2 months after the confrontation, Melissa arrived at the penthouse, visibly exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "We lost the business," she admitted after Rosa had shown her in. "The bank foreclosed last week. We couldn't make the loan payments." "I'm sorry to hear that," Catherine said, and meant it. Unlike Ashley and James's manipulations, Melissa and Daniel's business had at least been a genuine attempt to create something of their own, however financially naive. "Daniel's been interviewing for corporate jobs," Melissa continued, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "He actually got an offer yesterday. Not much money, but it's a start. And I've started designing websites, freelance, small projects, but I'm building a portfolio." And Catherine felt a surge of pride at her younger daughter's resilience. "That's commendable, Melissa, both of you." "We've had to downsize everything," Melissa went on. "Moved out of the house into a small apartment, sold a lot of stuff." She looked up at her mother, genuine remorse in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mom, not just for going along with James and Ashley's schemes, but for taking you for granted all these years, for seeing you as a source of money rather than as a person." The simple sincerity of the apology and the rare use of Mom instead of the more formal Mother touched Catherine deeply. This was what she had been hoping for, not just the struggle, but the growth that could come from it. "Thank you for saying that," Catherine responded, reaching out to squeeze her daughter's hand. "It means a great deal to me." Daniel and I have been talking, Melissa said hesitantly, about how we treated you after you lost your hearing, how impatient we were, how we never really tried to learn sign language or find better ways to communicate. We just took the path of least resistance, and that wasn't fair to you. Life rarely gives us second chances, Catherine said softly, but when it does, the wise seize them with both hands. Over the following months, a new pattern emerged. Ashley, surprisingly, excelled in her role at Brooks Properties. Her natural charm and social connections proved valuable in the marketing department, and her willingness to work hard, a trait Catherine hadn't seen since Ashley was a child, earned her the respect of colleagues who had initially viewed her with skepticism. Melissa and Daniel struggled more with the practical aspects of financial independence, but their marriage strengthened through the adversity. They visited Catherine regularly, not asking for money but seeking advice, gradually rebuilding the relationship on a foundation of mutual respect rather than financial dependence. James, true to form, attempted to fight back. He hired an attorney, claiming rights to Brooks' assets through his marriage to Ashley. Edward easily dismantled these claims, pointing to the ironclad prenuptial agreement James had signed 20 years earlier. When legal maneuvering failed, James resorted to threats first legal, then personal. Each attempt was met with the implacable wall of Catherine's resolve until finally he disappeared from their lives entirely. Last heard from in Dubai, attempting to charm a new wealthy widow. 6 months after the confrontation, Catherine invited her daughters to the penthouse for a private dinner. No husbands, no Rosa, just the three Brooks women. She prepared the meal herself, a skill she had once excelled at but rarely practiced in recent years. "This is delicious, Mom," Melissa said warmly as they enjoyed Catherine's signature roast. "I'd forgotten what an amazing cook you are. Your father always said I could have been a chef in another life," Catherine replied with a smile, the memory of William bringing warmth rather than pain for the first time in years. "I remember Dad bragging about your cooking to his business associates," Ashley added, her expression softening at the memory. "He was always so proud of you, of everything you did." "We built everything together," Catherine said, looking around the penthouse that held so many memories. "Equal partners from the very beginning, when all we had was a rundown apartment building and more ambition than sense." As they lingered over dessert, Catherine studied her daughters' faces, noting the changes these months of independence had wrought. Ashley's features had lost their brittle edge, replaced by a more genuine confidence born of actual accomplishment. Melissa's perpetual anxiety had given way to a calm self-assurance that reminded Catherine of William. "I have something to tell you both," Catherine said as they moved to the living room with coffee. "I've made another change to my will." Both daughters tensed visibly, exchanging apprehensive glances. "Not what you're thinking," Catherine assured them with a gentle smile. "I've reinstated your inheritances, with conditions. The bulk of the estate will still go to the foundation, but you'll each receive trust funds sufficient to provide security without enabling the kind of lifestyle that proved so problematic before." "Mom, we don't expect," Melissa began, but Catherine held up her hand. "I know you don't, and that's precisely why I'm doing this. You've both shown genuine growth these past months. You've earned back my trust, step by step." Tears welled in Ashley's eyes, real emotion, not the calculated displays Catherine had grown accustomed to. "Thank you for not giving up on us," she said quietly. "When all this happened, I was so angry. I blamed you for everything. But you were right. We needed this wake-up call." "I never gave up on you," Catherine replied. "I simply needed to see who you really were beneath the entitlement and dependency. And I needed you to see it, too." The conversation shifted to lighter topics: Ashley's recent promotion, Melissa's growing freelance business, Daniel's adjustment to corporate life, as they talked and laughed with an ease that had been absent for years. Catherine realized that her hearing wasn't the only thing that had been restored. Something far more precious had been reclaimed, the authentic connection with her daughters that money and manipulation had nearly destroyed. Later that evening, after her daughters had departed with genuine hugs and promises to return soon, Catherine stood on her terrace overlooking the glittering city. Rosa joined her, bringing a light shawl against the evening chill. "They've changed, haven't they?" Rosa observed, having watched the family drama unfold from her unique vantage point. "They have," Catherine agreed. "Not completely. Change never happens overnight, but they're on a better path now. And you, Mrs. Brooks, how are you feeling about everything?" Catherine considered the question, listening to the symphony of city sounds that surrounded her car horns. Distant music, the rustle of leaves in the terrace garden, each sound a gift, a connection to the world she had once feared lost forever. "I feel," she paused, searching for the right word, "whole. For the first time in many years, I feel whole." The next morning, Catherine called Dr. Chin's office to schedule an appointment. It was time to discuss the next phase of her plan, one that had been forming in her mind since the moment she first heard the world again. 3 days later, she sat across from Dr. Chin in his office, outlining her vision. "A center for auditory restoration," she explained, her eyes bright with purpose. "State-of-the-art facilities, research laboratories, treatment rooms all dedicated to making your groundbreaking procedure accessible to those who need it most." Dr. Chin's expression reflected both surprise and cautious excitement. "That's an extraordinarily generous proposal, Mrs. Brooks, but the costs would be astronomical. The technology alone—" "Money is not an issue," Catherine interrupted gently. "I've discussed this with Edward. The Brooks Foundation has the resources to fund the center entirely, from construction through to operational costs for at least the first decade." "But why?" Dr. Chin asked, clearly moved by the offer. "This level of philanthropy is exceptional." Catherine smiled, touching her ear lightly. "Because I know what it means to live in silence, and I know what it means to hear again. It's a gift beyond measure, one that should be available to everyone, not just those who can afford experimental procedures at exclusive clinics." Over the following weeks, Catherine threw herself into the project with the same determination and business acumen that had built her real estate empire. She assembled a team of architects, medical consultants, and project managers. She personally selected a plot of land on the outskirts of the city, a beautiful 10-acre property with rolling hills and mature trees that would provide a peaceful, healing environment. Ashley and Melissa watched their mother's transformation with amazement. The woman who had once seemed content to fade into the background of her own life was now vibrant, engaged, and more alive than they had seen her since before William's death. "I don't think I ever really knew her," Ashley confessed to Melissa over coffee one afternoon. "All those years, I saw what I wanted to see: a wealthy, aging widow who needed our help managing her affairs." "We both did," Melissa agreed. "Remember how Dad always said she was the brains behind half their business deals? I thought he was just being nice." "He wasn't," Ashley said, shaking her head ruefully. "I found some of the old acquisition files at the office last week. Mom's strategic notes were all over them, identifying properties with potential, calculating optimal purchase prices, projecting growth rates. She has an incredible mind for business." "And we treated her like she was helpless," Melissa said softly, the weight of their misjudgment settling between them. The sisters' paths diverged in their professional lives, but converged in their renewed relationship with their mother, Daman. Ashley continued at Brooks Properties, earning a legitimate promotion to marketing coordinator after 6 months of dedicated work. Melissa's freelance web design business slowly gained traction, with Catherine occasionally recommending her services to business associates, but only after confirming that Melissa's work genuinely merited the referrals. Daniel adapted to corporate life with surprising ease, his natural charm and work ethic earning him respect in his new company. Without the pressure of running a failing business, he and Melissa found their marriage on more solid ground than it had been in years. James, meanwhile, had indeed moved on to new hunting grounds. Divorce papers arrived for Ashley 8 months after his departure, with a settlement demand that Edward quickly reduced to a fraction of the original request. When finalized, Ashley celebrated with a small dinner party, her first social event in her modest new apartment. To freedom, she toasted, raising her glass to her mother, sister, and Daniel. From someone I never should have married in the first place. To new beginnings, Catherine added, clinking her glass against her daughter's. They can happen at any age. 1 year after the confrontation dinner that had changed everything, Catherine received the final architectural plans for the Brooks Center for auditory restoration. As she reviewed them in her study, she felt William's presence strongly, almost as if he were looking over her shoulder as he had done so many times during their business ventures. "You would approve of this, wouldn't you?" she murmured, tracing the elegant lines of the building's facade with her fingertip. "Not just the center, but what I did with the family." The familiar ache of missing him had softened over time, transformed into a comforting awareness of his continued influence in her life. She no longer needed to wonder what William would think. She knew him well enough to be certain. He would be proud of her courage, her compassion, and most of all, her refusal to settle for convenient lies when difficult truth was needed. 18 months after Catherine had regained her hearing, construction on the Brooks Center was nearing completion. The main building, a stunning contemporary structure of glass, steel, and warm wood, stood surrounded by carefully landscaped gardens designed specifically for acoustic pleasure fountains that created gentle, soothing sounds, wind chimes that played soft melodies in the breeze, paths lined with trees whose leaves rustled soothingly in the wind. Catherine visited the site weekly, often bringing Ashley or Melissa along to share in the progress. On this particular day, both daughters accompanied her, walking the grounds as the project manager pointed out the final touches being implemented. "The research wing will be fully equipped by next month," he explained, consulting his tablet. "Dr. Chin's team is already preparing to transfer their operations here." "And the patient accommodation wing?" Catherine asked, referring to the residential facility designed for those traveling from distant locations for treatment. "On schedule. The furnishings are being installed this week. 20 private suites, each with accessibility features and sound modulation technology as you specified." As they continued the tour, Catherine noticed Ashley hanging back, an unusual expression on her face. When the project manager moved ahead with Melissa to inspect the healing gardens, Catherine approached her eldest daughter. "What is it, Ashley?" "You seem troubled." Ashley hesitated, then gestured to the impressive complex before them. "All of this, it's extraordinary, Mom, but I can't help thinking about how differently things might have turned out." "What do you mean?" "If you hadn't caught us, if you hadn't had the surgery when you did, we would have taken everything from you. This center would never have existed. All the people it will help." Her voice trailed off. Heavy with the weight of what might have been, Catherine took her daughter's hand. "We can't live in the shadow of what might have been, Ashley. We can only move forward with what is." "But how do you not hate us?" Ashley asked, the question bursting forth as if she'd been holding it back for months. "How do you even stand to be around us after what we did?" Catherine considered the question carefully. Hate is a luxury I can't afford, she finally said. It takes too much energy, energy better spent on healing and building. Besides, she added with a small smile, you're not the same people who conspired against me, and I'm not the same woman who allowed herself to be taken advantage of. Ashley's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, Catherine replied. It's about choosing to release the past so it doesn't poison the future. I forgave you and your sister not because you earned it, but because I refuse to let bitterness define the rest of my life. Later that evening, as Catherine prepared for a rare night out, a charity gala where she would be honored for her philanthropic work, she found herself reflecting on that conversation with Ashley. How strange life was. How unpredictable its twists and turns. The surgery that had restored her hearing had indeed saved her fortune, but more importantly, it had ultimately saved her family not by preserving their wealth, but by stripping it away and forcing them to discover their true selves. The gala was held at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, its ballroom transformed into a glittering showcase of the city's elite. Ahem. As Catherine entered on Edward's arm, her longtime attorney having graciously agreed to escort her, she was immediately surrounded by well-wishers and admirers. Her story had become something of a legend in their social circle, though few knew the full truth of what had transpired within the Brooks family. Catherine, darling, Elaine Whitmore, an old friend, air-kissed her cheeks. Everyone's talking about your center. So generous, so visionary, and how wonderful that your daughters could join you tonight. Catherine glanced across the room where Ashley and Melissa stood with Daniel, all three dressed elegantly, but more modestly than in years past. The sisters caught her eye and smiled genuine smiles that reached their eyes, so different from the calculated expressions they had once worn in public. Yes, Catherine agreed. It is wonderful. The evening progressed with dinner, speeches, and the presentation of a humanitarian award that Catherine accepted with gracious humility. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped to the podium and surveyed the crowd, aware of how different this moment would have felt before her surgery, the strain of trying to read lips in a dimly lit room, the anxiety of possibly missing important information, the exhaustion of constant vigilance. Thank you for this honor, she began. The Brooks Center represents not just a medical facility, but a bridge between worlds, the world of silence and the world of sound. For 12 years, I lived in the former, and now, through the miracle of modern medicine and the dedication of physicians like Dr. Nathan Chen, she nodded toward the doctor, who sat at her table, I have returned to the latter. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But what I've learned through this journey is that sometimes silence has its own wisdom to impart. Sometimes we need to lose one sense to sharpen others, the sense of who we truly are, of what truly matters, of who truly cares for us. Catherine's gaze found her daughters in the crowd. The Brooks Center will help restore hearing to those who have lost it, but my hope is that it will do more than that. I hope it will restore connections, rebuild relationships, and renew lives just as mine has been renewed in ways I could never have imagined. The applause that followed her speech was thunderous, but to Catherine, the most beautiful sound was the quiet, "Thank you, Mom," that Melissa whispered when she returned to her table, words spoken not for show, not for gain, but from a place of genuine gratitude and love. 2 weeks later, Catherine received an unexpected visitor at the penthouse. Rosa showed Daniel into the study, where Catherine was reviewing documents for the center's upcoming ribbon-cutting ceremony. Daniel, she greeted him, surprised. In the months since the family upheaval, he had been polite but somewhat distant during family gatherings, clearly uncomfortable with the new dynamics. Is everything all right? Is Melissa okay? She's fine, he assured her quickly. I actually came to see you, alone. Catherine gestured for him to sit. What can I do for you? Daniel fidgeted uncharacteristically, seeming to struggle with what he wanted to say. Finally, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small notebook. I've been in therapy, he began, his voice low. Part of the process is making amends to people I've wronged. He placed the notebook on the desk between them. These are the dates and amounts of money I took from your personal accounts when you would invite us to stay at the penthouse. Small things cash from your desk drawer. A few pieces of jewelry I sold. Nothing like what James did, but wrong nonetheless. Catherine stared at the notebook, then back at her son-in-law, seeing him perhaps for the first time not as the charming opportunist she had always assumed him to be, but as a flawed man struggling to be better. I've calculated the total with interest, Daniel continued. I can't repay it all at once, but I've worked out a payment plan. He slid a folded document across the desk. $500 a month until it's paid back. I know it doesn't make up for the betrayal of trust, but Daniel, Catherine interrupted gently, pushing the notebook and document back toward him. Keep your money. Use it for your family, for your future with Melissa. Your honesty today is worth more to me than these repayments. He looked up, clearly not expecting this response. But I want to make it right. You are making it right, Catherine assured him, by being honest, by working hard at your job, by being a good husband to my daughter. That's all the restitution I need. After Daniel left, visibly moved by their conversation, Catherine found herself smiling. Another piece of healing, another step toward wholeness. The Brooks family was transforming, one difficult conversation, one honest moment at a time. The day of the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Brooks Center for Auditory Restoration dawned with perfect spring weather, clear blue skies, gentle breezes, and the sweet scent of newly bloomed flowers filling the air. Catherine stood in her bedroom, putting the finishing touches on her appearance. She had chosen a simply elegant cream-colored suit for the occasion, accessorized with the pearl necklace William had given her on their 25th anniversary. You look beautiful, Mrs. Brooks, Rosa said, entering with a small box in her hands. The car will be ready in 30 minutes. Thank you. Rosa. Catherine smiled at her faithful companion. I can hardly believe this day is finally here. I have something for you, Rosa said, extending the box. A small gift to mark the occasion. Surprised, Catherine opened it to find a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a sound wave. It's lovely, Rosa, but you didn't need to. It's the sound wave of your name. Rosa explained. Your name as spoken by me. I had it made from a recording. Her eyes grew misty. So you'll always remember the journey from silence to sound. Deeply touched, Catherine pinned the brooch to her lapel. I could never forget, Rosa, but I'll treasure this always. The Brooks Center had been designed to make a statement not of opulence or excess, but of hope and possibility. As Catherine's car approached the property, she could see the gathered crowd of medical professionals, potential patients, media representatives, and community members. A small stage had been set up near the main entrance, with rows of chairs arranged on the immaculate lawn. Catherine spotted her daughters immediately. Ashley stood tall and confident in a blue dress that complemented her mother's outfit, chatting animatedly with Dr. Chen. Melissa, in a flowing green ensemble, was adjusting Daniel's tie, a gesture of casual intimacy that spoke volumes about how their relationship had evolved. As Catherine stepped from the car, applause broke out. She moved through the crowd, greeting guests with the gracious ease that had always been her hallmark, until she reached her family. Mom, this is incredible, Melissa said, embracing her. Have you seen inside the finished building yet? Not since they completed the interior, Catherine admitted. I wanted to experience it today, with everyone else. You're going to be amazed, Ashley assured her. We got a preview yesterday. The acoustics are incredible, every space designed to enhance sound clarity while remaining soothing to newly sensitive ears. Dr. Chen approached, beaming with pride and gratitude. Mrs. Brooks, we're ready to begin whenever you are. Taking a deep breath, Catherine nodded and made her way to the stage. As she looked out at the assembled crowd, she felt a profound sense of rightness, as if every decision, every struggle, every moment of her life had been leading to this. Welcome, everyone, to the Brooks Center for Auditory Restoration, she began, her voice clear and strong. My own journey from silence back to sound taught me many things. Chief among them is that while hearing connects us to the world, understanding connects us to each other. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the audience before settling on her daughters in the front row. Sometimes we must lose something precious to recognize what truly matters. In my case, losing my hearing eventually led to gaining deeper insights into myself and those around me, and regaining my hearing through the brilliant work of Dr. Chen and his team gave me the opportunity to create something that will help others experience the same miracle. Catherine gestured to the gleaming building behind her. This center represents not just medical innovation, but the power of second chances. It will serve patients regardless of their financial circumstances, advance research into auditory restoration, and train the next generation of specialists in this field. She continued, outlining the center's programs and services, the cutting-edge surgical facilities, the rehabilitation programs, the support services for families, the research laboratories. As she spoke, Catherine could see her words landing with impact, particularly among those in the audience who wore hearing aids or showed signs of hearing impairment. In closing, she said, I want to express my gratitude to everyone who helped make this dream a reality. Dr. Chin and his medical team, our architects and builders, the Brooks Foundation Board, and most especially, my family. Catherine looked directly at Ashley and Melissa, her eyes conveying what words alone could not: the journey they had taken together, the pain they had overcome, the new bonds they had forged. My daughters, Ashley and Melissa, have taught me that it's never too late to listen with your heart as well as your ears. Their support has meant everything to me. Tears glistened in both daughters' eyes as they returned her gaze, a silent communication of love and reconciliation passing between them, with a sense of ceremony. Catherine moved to the center's entrance, where a large red ribbon stretched across the doors. Dr. Chen handed her a pair of oversized silver scissors, and with a confident snip, she cut the ribbon, officially opening the Brooks Center for Auditory Restoration. The applause that followed was thunderous, a beautiful cacophony of sound that washed over Catherine like a blessing. Once such noise would have been lost to her. Now she heard every nuance, every variation, every individual contribution to the whole, just as she now saw her family clearly not perfect, not entirely healed, but genuinely transformed by the crucible of truth they had endured together. As she descended from the podium to join her daughters, Catherine's heart swelled with gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought them here. The silence had revealed what words could not. The truth had hurt, then healed, and the love that remained tested, tempered, and true was stronger than anything money could buy or deception could destroy. 6 months after the opening of the Brooks Center, Catherine sat in the facility's peaceful garden, watching a young mother guide her child, a recent recipient of the same auditory restoration procedure Catherine had undergone, through a series of listening exercises. The little girl's face lit up with each new sound she identified correctly, her joy so pure and unrestrained that Catherine couldn't help but smile. She's doing remarkably well. Dr. Chen said, joining Catherine on the bench. One of our youngest patients, and already exceeding all expectations. Children adapt so quickly, Catherine observed. Their brains still so plastic, so eager to forge new connections. True, but we're seeing excellent results across all age groups. Your investment in our research has allowed us to refine the procedure, making it more effective for a wider range of hearing loss causes. He gestured to a group of adults engaged in a rehabilitation session nearby. Our success rate is now approaching 95%. That's wonderful news. Nathan, Catherine had come to use the doctor's first name as they'd worked closely together over the months, their professional relationship evolving into a warm friendship. And how are you doing? He asked. Still adjusting to your own miracle, Catherine laughed softly. After 2 years, I should hope I've adjusted by now, though I still have moments when a particular sound rang on the roof, a piece of music I'd forgotten. The specific timbre of my granddaughter's voice catches me by surprise. Dr. Chen nodded understanding. The emotional component of hearing restoration is something we're studying more closely now. The psychological impact is often as significant as the physical change. I've been thinking about that a great deal, Catherine admitted, about how regaining my hearing changed far more than just my ability to perceive sound. It changed my relationships, my understanding of myself, my purpose, which is precisely why we've expanded our psychological support services, Dr. Chen said. Thanks to your additional funding, we now have a full team of counselors specialized in the emotional aspects of sensory restoration. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Ashley, who approached with purposeful strides, a tablet computer in hand. Mom, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to catch you before your next appointment. The Foundation Board approved the expansion proposal. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Construction on the pediatric wing can begin next quarter. That's excellent news, Catherine replied, pride evident in her voice. Ashley had recently joined the Brooks Foundation Board, bringing her newfound work ethic and growing business acumen to the philanthropic side of the family legacy. Dr. Chen excused himself to attend to patients, leaving mother and daughter alone in the garden. You know, Ashley said, settling onto the bench beside Catherine. I was thinking about our conversation at the construction site last year about forgiveness and moving forward. Oh, you said something about choosing to release the past so it doesn't poison the future. Ashley's expression grew thoughtful. I've been working on that in therapy, but it's still hard sometimes. The guilt, I mean. Catherine took her daughter's hand. Guilt serves a purpose when it guides us toward better choices, but at some point, it becomes a burden that prevents growth. How do you let it go? By accepting that you cannot change what happened, only what happens next. Catherine squeezed her hand gently. And by recognizing that the person who made those choices isn't entirely who you are now. Ashley nodded slowly. I'm trying. Some days are easier than others. That's true of most worthwhile things, Catherine replied with a smile. Later that afternoon, Catherine met Melissa and her 3-year-old daughter, Lily, in the center's cafe. The little girl ran to her grandmother with delighted abandon, throwing her arms around Catherine's legs. Grammy, I brought you a picture, Lily announced, holding up a colorful crayon drawing. It's you and me and Mommy at the park. It's beautiful, sweetheart, Catherine exclaimed, admiring the cheerful scribbles. I'll hang it in my office right away. As Lily settled with a juice box and cookies, Melissa leaned closer to her mother. How did Ashley's presentation to the board go? She was so nervous. Brilliantly, Catherine assured her. The pediatric wing is officially approved. That's wonderful. She's worked so hard on that proposal. Melissa's expression softened. It's still strange sometimes. seeing her like this passionate about something that doesn't directly benefit her. People can surprise you, Catherine said, watching Lily carefully color another masterpiece. If given the chance, you gave us that chance, Mom, when you could have just cut us off completely. Catherine shook her head. I gave you an opportunity. You're the ones who chose to take it, to do the hard work of becoming better people. She smiled at her younger daughter. I'm proud of you both, you know, not just for what you've accomplished professionally, but for who you've become. That evening, Catherine hosted a small dinner party at the penthouse, just her daughters and their families, Rosa and Edward. As they gathered around the table William had so loved, the conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and the occasional squeal from Lily, who was being entertained by Daniel's silly faces. Looking around at these faces, some bound to her by blood, others by choice and loyalty, Catherine felt a profound sense of peace. This was family, not the facade they had maintained for years, but the real thing imperfect, sometimes challenging, but authentic and, finally, honest. After dinner, as they enjoyed coffee in the living room, Ashley raised her cup in an impromptu toast. To Mom, who taught us the hard way that real wealth has nothing to do with money. To second chances, Melissa added, and the courage to make the most of them. To listening, Catherine concluded, her eyes bright with emotion, with our ears when possible, and with our hearts always. Later, when everyone had gone and the penthouse was quiet, Catherine stood on her terrace as she often did, absorbing the night sounds of the city she loved. So much had changed in the 2 years since that fateful decision to undergo experimental surgery, not just her ability to hear, but her understanding of what it truly meant to listen. Some called it a miracle that Catherine Brooks had regained her hearing after 12 years of silence. But the real miracle, she knew, was finding the courage to listen to the truth and the wisdom to recognize that sometimes the most important things in life are heard not with the ears, but with the heart. She thought of William then, as she often did in moments of quiet reflection. We did well, didn't we? She whispered to the star-filled sky. Not just with the business, but with the girls. In the end, the gentle breeze that rustled the terrace plants seemed almost like a response, a loving whisper from the past, affirming the present, blessing the future. Catherine smiled and turned toward the warmth of her home, carrying within her the most precious sound of all the quiet certainty that she had finally, truly found her way back from silence.